Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Trader Talk Radio, the European Open. We are looking at a FTSE 100. No Jeff with us today. We're looking at FTSE 100, which is struggling somewhat. Let me get rid of these so they're not so distracting. It's struggling somewhat this morning, I think, to find direction. I think huge move to the downside. I'm probably looking a little bit weaker this morning, but I can't honestly at this stage hang my hat on either direction. I think there's probably this trend line here, which is just caging the price action here, and we do have some news and data from the UK later on, and I suspect that may well leave us in a little bit of a holding pattern here. So might need to, I've got a few longs in the market, but I might need to take a little bit of protection to the downside, just because I am not sure. I'm just not sure. I can't say really one way or the other where this is going. We've had some fairly positive price action over the last day or so as we come up here. So obviously this is a surefire signal for some upside, and that did start to push forward. A couple of days ago, this bar appeared. Now you can see that is an engulfing bar. Close enough anyway. It's close enough to give us that signal, but price action managed to hold really from the lows, and since then we've had some pretty dodgy movement today. I think this is indicative of just expressing the concern that is out there with these trade wars. Overnight, we had a suggestion that the trade discussions were going to be on hold. I don't think they were going to meet at one point, and that really did provide some pretty vicious price action. As you can see here, there's a 15-minute chart, but right from the highs to the lows, within an hour, we came to test these lows again, and we have managed to pick up again. So there are pivots around here, but I'm just a little bit suspicious. Now, what might happen is the price may well be able to hold just around this pivot. It might just be kind of like back and forth around the pivot. I'd kind of like to see what the first 15 or so minutes are going to provide before making a decision, but I may not get that opportunity. It's all going to be dependent on what happens when the market opens. But you can see that there is that little bit of weakness, and I suspect it's probably coming from this area up here. We're probably just not convinced about this trend line. If it gets through here, of course, then it's got the weekly pivot. So let's see if we can get this. This would be the ideal scenario from my perspective. And it might give us just a little bit of confidence to take the long further. But let's say that we can come up and then come back and test this area. And if we can test this area, that will probably be the sweet spot to take a trade. I wouldn't want to trade long into here if you're thinking about going long. The short is not really convincing. Obviously, we got a little trend to the upside starting on the 15-minute chart. It might be that we kind of like, we carve a line here, and if we close below that line and the pivot, then there could be some further moves to the downside. But let's see if we can get this. This would be the ideal scenario if we can try and take a trade in that point there. The issue, of course, is the China and United States trade war. But there is some news, as I said, from the UK this morning, and I suppose maybe we come up and get caged by the weekly pivot, and then just before the news and data comes out, we start to drift down. Then we go back up again. That would be the ideal scenario. Not saying that's going to happen, but that would be the ideal scenario. We know that the October month in itself is a bullish month. So, so far we're still bearish, and it's going to be unlikely, I would suggest, that that we are going to end up this month bullish. I'll show you why, because this is the This is the current bar on the on the monthly time frames here. Sorry, we've got a lot to make up. There's a lot of movement to make up. So slightly, I think, longer term into the end of the month, we can be edged to the upside. But you know, to make up another 300 pips over the course of the next 2 weeks is going to be dependent on a trade spat being sorted out. So if Donald Trump comes back over the weekend and says they have something of a deal, then I would suggest that we probably would continue to grind forward. If we also then got the Fed coming out and saying that they were going to ease some policy, then the market would drive forward. So I would have thought that the two drivers we're looking at over the course of the next couple of weeks are probably the trade war and the Fed. Now, Brexit may play a part. It's a difficult one because it may be less it may be less UK dependent than I have anticipated. It might become a little bit more of a worldwide event. But with a weaker pound, it should help stocks. But we are in a bit of a tricky position right now because we've got a trade war that is unconcluded, if you like. So with an unconcluded trade war, it may well suggest that we stay in choppy price action. Now, if that trade war concludes badly, then certainly the US markets are going to struggle. If the trade war, now we can't really surmise too much from this RSI. It's a little bit choppy around here. Let's see what happens this morning. Let's just bring this onto a 15-minute chart. As I say, I'm a bit concerned about the downside here, so I might have to take a short, but if possible, I'd like to hold on as long as I can, just to see what the early price action suggests. Obviously, if we start moving below that area, we're going to have to take the short on. But let's see if the market can actually get through this level early doors just before the UK releases numbers. Anyway, back to the issue. So we got trade wars obviously causing issues. The fact that gold is stuck at 1506 shows us that the protection that is being bought up in the market is still buoyant. You know, it's not, people aren't really releasing their holdings in gold. So because of that, it would suggest that there is some nervousness out there, and even if the market moves to the upside, we might continue to see gold move to the upside until we get resolution. So it might end up being that even though the market is moving up without any news, it doesn't suggest out and out confidence. So we've got to be a little bit careful. And I think these bars here, they really telegraph the fact of how careful we've got to be. We are in a very, very difficult state, even to the point where this is the perfect entry, isn't it? When we think about this, we've got a higher high, a higher low potentially, and this is the first point. It's on a daily pivot, and yet I'm still not comfortable and confident calling that, because there's just so much out there that makes me just a little bit nervous. And in actual fact, I am looking for a little bit of downside protection rather than adding to the upside. I think we are literally climbing the wall of worry right now. Technically speaking, the market is certainly looking like upside. So if we're just purely going on technicals, then we should be looking for upside, and that's because of a broader picture. When we look at the weekly charts here, which I'm going to bring you a clean chart here. When we look at the weekly chart, the broader picture, for the technicals suggests upside, and the reason for that is that we have a little intermediate trend line down here. That's the intermediate trend line there. Now, we're not going to include this down here right now because of the touches that we have along the trend line here. So it would suggest that we are at or near a low opportunity on the weekly chart, which would suggest upside. Obviously, this head and shoulders pattern is concerning, but the head and shoulders pattern really provides a buying opportunity when it doesn't break down on the neckline. The head and shoulders, they only work out a third or so of the time. So there's every chance that this could move back to the upside and be gone. The head and shoulders might get swept aside. It might just be that we're pausing a little bit before we're really kind of like going to come back up again and go and move down. Or it could just tank to the downside. But technically speaking, this is a really good place to look for a long. It just needs some resolution. So if the resolution is positive, then the neckline should hold, and then who knows where we go. If the resolution is negative, I would suggest even with a weaker pound, the market is probably going to break down this neckline, and then there's plenty of chance to get in on the short. So we are looking at long. I'm kind of speculating on a long, but I'm not comfortable calling it at this particular moment. It's just the moment, it's not longer term. There is certainly, as I say, a technical suggestion that we are moving up, and we want to be looking for the long opportunities, but it's tough. It's a tough market, and you can see, this first 15 minute, in fact, the first 5 minutes, hasn't managed to provide any kind of direction whatsoever. We've opened down at the low of the bar, and looks like we're going to end up pretty much right on top of the same price. Because of that, it would suggest again that weakness could ensue, but I think this is going to be a tricky one. I think we could be heading for a pretty choppy opening and fairly dangerous trading. So we're going to need some clarity. Now, when it comes down to technical clarity, if we think about fundamental clarity, that could come from, as I say, a manner of things. It could come from the trade war. It could come from Brexit. It could come from the Fed. There's probably 3 things out there that's going to give us some clarity. Technically speaking, clarity is going to come from a break to the upside on the out of this pattern, which lost, which is going to be here. A break to the upside out of that pattern is going to give us some clarity. It probably needs to take out the weekly pivot in truth to really get motoring, but a break to the upside would help. Other clarity may well come from a break to the downside, probably taking out this low rather than this low, just because we could come down here and bounce the weekly daily pivot and be all over the place again. So I think for me, I'm going to have to look for shorts, but not until we get below 71.28. And I'd like to look for a long if we come and bounce away from the weekly pivot and come back, test, and then sort of like start to look for a long. We're too close to this price anyway to take a trade. So we are probably just a little bit in a bit of a vacuum as we kind of range between these 2 points. So nothing to do right now. We've got to be careful, and let's just have a quick look at the news for the day as well, just to see what might help shape us moving forward for the day. It's been a tough market so far, October. Probably indicative of the year in many respects. It's not been the easiest trading environment. Right, does it get through? First time of asking. It's probably got to get through early doors, to be honest, because if it doesn't, then we could be waiting right until 10 o'clock. Okay, it's given it a good shout now. But you can see how I just have confusion in my head of the best way to trade this right now. And when that's the case, I prefer just to kind of sit back and let things unfold rather than jumping on board, because if I don't have clarity and it's down to nothing but information overload, and it's not really giving me enough. But if I don't have clarity, then I just can't pick a position and be confident. GDP from the United Kingdom later on is going to probably shape the day somewhat. Manufacturing production will likely shape the day as well. 2-week numbers from this will probably maybe start to push Carney in a direction. The fact that we've got the Bank of England governor out at 10:20 also could make trading kind of difficult, and it's just going to be down to whether people are quite happy with resolutions of trade spats at the minute, which is what they are. ECB monetary policy meeting accounts later on, and then CPI and core CPI, also big numbers today. So really right up until the US market, we have probably got a glut of information that would suggest, it doesn't necessarily say for sure, but would suggest that any significant movement is unlikely. So I can't say that, and this is the thing, confusion is coming from just a lack of clarity in the information, and maybe there's just information here that could provide some clarity. So I don't necessarily, I wouldn't necessarily suggest, don't do anything this morning, but I would say if you're going to trade this morning, be very, very careful. And if you're going to trade, if you want to have a better session to trade, the FTSE 100, that is, then I would suggest trading the US market, because by that time we would have everything out. We should be getting some positivity and direction. But look at this, indicative of what I've been talking about. The market is just struggling to find direction. It needs to get through here, as I say, early doors. Not really done that as yet. Caged by this point. This is starting ominously to suggest that we don't have anything positive in the way of movement before, maybe even Mark Carney. But as I say, that the short prospect to me is looking likely. I don't want to have to take it. You see, I don't suspect we're going to go down here either. That's why the shorts is not that attractive to me either. You're playing with 20 pips here and there, and where stops are being placed, or wherever however you choose to protect your trade is going to be tricky, because it could whip. It whipped up a moment ago, and it's coming back down again. But this is going to make it difficult. So nothing to trade on the FTSE, in my opinion. So let's move on. Let's have a look at gold. Now, gold, you can see here that gold has been showing that the gold bulls, if you like, are still keen to buy some protection. They're not 100% convinced that this is over by any stretch. The trade spat is over. It looks a little weak here. It looks like it would love to start moving to the downside, but it's struggling again to kind of like choose direction. A couple of days ago, this is really kind of mirroring what happened with the FTSE 100. We had a move to the downside, a move back to the upside, really frozen in time yesterday, and so far back to the original price of the open of gold. So gold is struggling also to find direction. So that really, it just says to us that because the trade negotiations haven't started yet, the market is just not sure which way to jump. Yes, people want a nice cheap price, but by the same token, they don't want to kind of get swept up in any negative headlines, which as we saw overnight, probably would have caned quite a lot of people's trading accounts. So gold is a place that people will put their money while they are not 100% sure. While they continue to buy stocks, they are probably continuing to buy stocks and protecting it with gold, rather than starting to lighten up in one direction or another. And that's what you'll see. You'll see that people move out of stocks and into gold when there's panic, and they will come out of gold and into stocks when there's just a little bit more calm. In this current environment, things change, but in this current environment, gold appears to be a proxy for a hedge in many respects. So not a lot to garner from gold. Doesn't tell us too much. Pretty difficult price action going on there as well. Again, you're probably looking for upside shorter term, but on the longer term, You can see that this is a 4-hour chart, and on the longer term, it's also suggesting that that it's willing to attempt to go down. We'll check the dollar yen. Dollar yen, we've seen over the last few days move down, which would suggest that risk is back off the table. But now it's just starting to climb up again, and it managed to kind of find some support down here. So it's just managing to climb up again. Early doors price action again so far this morning doesn't give us a lot of information. This is the last 4 hours, last 5-6 hours actually of trade, and this was again the tank into the downside was off the news that that the trade meeting was off, and then the market found out that that just wasn't true, and they started to buy back up again. So slightly more confidence out there, but really back to where we started, and uncertainty prevails. So nothing is suggesting trade right now, is it? And if we then bring the S&P into play as well, probably is showing us, you can see all over the charts this move here. Every chart pretty much that we've looked at has had a bar like this, which just shows you the nervousness out there and shows you how difficult the environment is. But again, this is probably, again, edging more for upside than downside. The trend hasn't been broken. This is a monthly chart, and the trend hasn't been broken to the downside in the on the longer term time frames. This is the weekly chart. Again, structure still holds. We haven't taken out this low. And when we flip to the dailies, there is a downtrend on the dailies, but the downtrend on the dailies is again struggling to break through. There is a big head and shoulders pattern going on here. There is also a potential for this to be a left shoulder and a head, which would suggest that it's going to take quite a while to form that right shoulder. But during that time, it would suggest that we're probably looking more for upside than downside. So you can see the difficulties, and that just says straight away, with our timing hat on, now is just not the right time. So I don't know if anybody's looking at anything else, but if you've got something, let me know, because this show is going to be pretty quick. Now let's have a look at the euro, because the euro is the other interesting currency that I know a lot of people like to look at and trade. And this is what we got with the euro. It's just right on top of this pattern here. And this would suggest that the Fed is likely to act. So that's what the weakness in the dollar is suggesting. And the euro is a fantastic chart for that. If you want to look at the Aussie would tell us maybe a little bit more about China. So let's have a look quickly at the Aussie as well. So this is the situation with the Aussie. Maybe it's starting to suggest that again that the Chinese situation is pretty good, and we can see that the Aussie is maybe attempting to move to the upside at this particular stage, but it's still again caged within a pattern. Is it likely to break out this pattern before we have anything significant, is the question you want to ask yourself if you're going to trade it. Because, why would you trade it here? You're trading right into resistance. Much better to see if it'll come through and come back. And if it does, then you're gone. And I'd suggest that that's the same with the euro as well. With the euro, we're right on top of a level of resistance. I would have thought that if you are a scalper, you're looking for downside. If you are a longer term trader, you just want this to break through, and if it breaks through, then on the recess, then we should be good to go and good to move in the in a positive direction. So nothing to do with the euro either. I wanted to check euro pound. Euro pound grinding its way back up again. The Brexit negotiations seem to have hit a bit of a stalling. I think people still want to try and buy the pound, which is why it hasn't really taken off on this chart. There's probably this area here would suggest that that we could see some weakness in the euro pound, but that's going to be dependent on a deal. If there's a deal, then the euro pound looks like a fantastic pattern to try and trade. It might end up being a cup and handle even. You just don't know at this stage. But so far, I would suggest that the euro pound is at a pretty good level here. So what we want to see is probably just a bit of fluctuating around about this price, and then if there's some sort of deal, what would be the ideal way to trade the euro pound, in my opinion, would be seeing if there's some fluctuation around this price, and just seeing if there's a few bars that that give us you know, the suggestion that that actually we are looking for downside. And if we get some high test bars along here, maybe even probably that's the best thing, high test bars. But even you know, a couple of dojis or something like that would be pretty good. Then we can start thinking about entries just below, you know, well, not just below, but a little bit below, because if it tanks, it's going to go for quite some distance, at least to this point. So really, we just need this going on before the resolution. Put an entry down there, and you know, hope that it's far enough away not to get taken in on any whipsaw, and then you can really ride something. You know, you can really ride something quite significant. So the euro pound to me is a decent potential trade, but I think that there's going to be a specific way to play that, which doesn't appear just yet. But I'd be looking for downside initially. Now, obviously, if the trades the negotiations don't go well, and Brexit still looks like it is looming large, then there's a completely different strategy, you know, with something like this, which would suggest that really what you'd be then after is it breaking up and seeing if there is a way to trade above the level instead. Because this would suggest that could be a left shoulder and that could be a head, and we could be looking for some sort of right shoulder here to pick it up on. So again, I like to pick things up on the right shoulder, but I think in an instance like this, you could quite easily put an entry above a neckline instead, just to make sure you don't get caught in any whipsaws. And if it's going to go, it's going to go probably hard and high. So opportunities will probably arise, but we are in a waiting game. We got the waiting game going on. FTSE 100 continuing to show that, and it's just not moving right now. So a choppy market that only people with a huge account that don't have to trade with spreads are going to make money out of, because you can see that the market just isn't moving, and I'm just not willing to call a price direction right now. As I say, I'm slightly edged. I'm edgy for downside on the short term, because I think maybe easing into some news might be the most likely. However, the longer term is suggesting to me upside, and that just the recipe for that is for nothing to do. So I've got nothing. That's the bottom line, and I've got nothing because the market is offering nothing. Now, it's these days that we really need to understand what's going on in the charts and understand that it's better to stay out. Ben, let me check this out. So, question: dollar yen daily from September to now. Does it look like a double top and a long and a bearish fang? Let's have a look at the dollar yen. I like the dollar yen because it does give us this is probably my, well, yeah, I'd say it is. I think it's my favorite currency pair, the dollar yen. I've always liked it. So what are you seeing? Let's see what I'm seeing and what you're seeing. You are seeing, if we can answer daily from September to now, does it look like a double top? September. This is a double top. Yes, absolutely. So, you know, as with all this stuff, there's patterns within patterns. And a bearish flag. A bearish flag would be a short, right? I think I know what you mean. Do you mean this here? Let's see if I can do it with this instead. You mean that as the bear flag? And let's see if I can get. You can't move this, unfortunately. Yeah, is that what you're talking about, Ben? That as a bear flag, because that's correct. Yeah. So that bear flag comes down, right? Yes. Now, what we have, what we have is a pattern within a pattern. I don't like this bear flag. I've got to say, it's getting a bit too long in the tooth. It's got the flag is almost double the time distance of the pole, which I don't particularly like. That's not that palatable to me. So if you were looking at the bear flag, then you're looking for it to kind of resolve itself down here, and that could absolutely happen. You know, there's probably a case to be made for that down there. So yes, I do see that, but the thing that I'm looking at, and my eye's always drawn to this, so it's not by any stretch absolute, but my eye is drawn really to this. You know, I see that going on, and I see this going on. So that suggests to me an inverted head and shoulders. So that's what I'd be looking at, and I think that if this is in play, and the reason that I like this is because if that is the case, if we do have an inverted head and shoulders, then there is probably, you know, necklines probably exist in a difficult way somewhere up here, and we're at the low end, you know, so we'd be picking up on the right shoulder, and the way that I would look to pick that up is on a shorter term time frame. So I look at the inverted head and shoulders on the daily, and then if I go down to my 4 hourly, I see that this is making a series of higher highs and higher lows and a higher high. So I'd be personally on the camp of looking for upside. Now, the other thing about this is we do have to be aware of what may be driving this, and what is going to drive this into the bear flag. Or now the other thing about the bear flag, let's bring it up here. Now, if we see that bear flag, which would make me included pretty nervous, then the way that I would trade the bear flag, because my wider picture is for upside, is that I would look along the bear flag's formation. I'd look along the lines of the bear flag, which is kind of showing me that. It's showing me that, you know, this is the kind of bear flag channel, if you like. Then what I'd want to do is, as it comes down, I'd want to try and pick it up at the low end of the bear flag, because if I'm wrong, so, you know, in a really tight scenario, in a very tight position. But if I'm right, then I've picked it up right at the low end of the right shoulder, and you know, then you can really go. The only reason I brought this one up is because I wanted to look at the pivots as well, and it does mean ignoring the pivots completely, which, you know, sometimes you just have to do, because the market does. They were ignored here, then they've been ignored here. All of a sudden, the monthly's been a little bit more respected, but the pivots have been ignored. So if we pick it up down here, we're going to be ignoring the weekly pivot and the daily and the monthly, because, you know, price will be below those areas. But I'm okay with that if I get a decent price. So, and you can go in light as well, you know, because you'd be getting such a good price that you can add later on. So that looks to be like the channel that we're going to have to break through, and I'd want it down here. And if I get it down there, then I get my inverted head and shoulders, and I get a decent trade down there. What I would need to know is that it doesn't breach the 4 hour trend, which, if we look here, depending on when it happened, it may not. So it might be that I'd have to wait until the 12th, because it wouldn't breach this low then. You know, I might be waiting for Monday before I traded that. But if it came down in here on Monday, then it would continue to hold up this particular low down here on the 4 hour, and it would mean that we're still picking it up at the lower end of the channel. And it might even help with those pivots as well by next week. And it would also be the low end of the inverted head and shoulders. That's the way that I would read that. Yeah, it does look like a long time. You're absolutely right. But you know what? We've got the trade meeting is this weekend. So in actual fact, it probably needs to pass before we trade this anyway, because if after the weekend we, you know, wake up on Sunday or Monday, and because we have to think what's likely to happen with this trade war is not a whole bunch, but what the market is probably after is just a bit of an easing in the rhetoric, so it's not so aggressive. So if the market gets what it needs, which could be a partial trade deal, then we might find ourselves like still floating around here, which means that we get the opportunity to pick it up. But if it doesn't get what it needs, then we're likely to be down here and break through, which means we can probably pick it up on the return. So the trade meeting might well end up being fairly benign. So it doesn't really tell us one way or the other, which means what's going to happen. They might just sort of like do some sort of deal. Which means that what we can do then is allow the market to tell us what it thinks about it, and it'll tell us in one of two ways. It will tell us with a hold here or a break here, and if it breaks, we're looking for downside on return, and if it holds, we're just looking to try and enter on the lower end of the channel. So that would be the way that I would try and unscramble what was offered to me. Yeah, because it's the lower end of the bear flag, isn't it? I mean, but before that happens, before we get the trade spat, the obvious place to go short would be the higher end of the channel, which I think is okay. Unless we get some real meat on the bone. If we don't get meat on the bone, then we probably should be looking for the short. Until we get some sort of resolution going on. The FTSE is starting to weaken a little bit, so my suspicions have so far ended up being correct that that if we are looking for a trade, we're looking longer term long, but the short term short still looks like it could do with some flushing out. But I still want it below this point here. That's a pretty bad bar, right? It's a pretty ugly looking bar. Don't like that at all. So that is what I have. I might well have to take a short on under this bar here, but we'll see what happens. Right. And we got anything else that they want to bring to the table? I mean, I've kind of made my choice today, which is really to wait until the US market, even though I might take on a short here. I'm going to wait until the US market opens up. So I'll probably take the rest of the morning off unless I've got to manage this trade. Okay. We will be back tomorrow. Now, I don't know if Jeff's going to be in tomorrow. He's pretty ill, actually. So we'll be back again tomorrow, and we'll just see what goes on. I would suggest to everyone to either switch off your laptops or your PCs and forget it for the morning. Actually, it's not your morning, is it? It's 3:30 your time. So unfortunately, the movement is likely to come in the US session. Likely, not definitely, but likely. And I suspect a lot of you might well be in bed by then, in 6 hours' time, or getting close to it. But that's the time that I'd be looking for trades if I were you. I wouldn't be looking for anything otherwise. Okay, but yeah, we'll be back same trade time, same trade channel tomorrow. Until then, happy trading and stay safe.